Hello, I'm Brandon, and I want to welcome you to the Tansson Talk Show, where our mission here is to help bring people together. I always love doing this show, and heading into episode 77, I'm just so excited and thrilled to speak with Beau Deseo. Thank you so much, and welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm just so excited, like I said, to have you. And so, first of all, how are you doing today?
Blessed. I draw breath.
I love that. And if you're able to give yourself a little brief introduction before we go ahead and get started here today.
Yeah, so my name is Beau Deseo. I'm the founder of Deseo Media Company and as well as Deseo Realty Limited. I am a real estate investor and the founder of a media company where we also podcast and highlight other people's stories. So I'm just your friendly neighborhood Filipino kid. And yeah.
I love that, and I'm just so excited to dive right into this, and so of course, as you just mentioned in your introduction, that of course you have your Deseo Media Company, and of course I know that you do real estate as well, and so I actually did want to ask which one came first for you in making.
The real estate company. Um, I I started it when I was still in the military and I needed a house. But I was always planning to buy my parents a house because we were kind of living in poverty for the longest time.
And I want to backtrack a bit too. And so, of course, I do know that you are a decorated military veteran. First of all, thank you so much for your service.
Thank you for your support.
Yeah, and so how did your upbringing, help bring you to, to enlist into the military? How was that process for you?
I actually, so that process was really interesting because at the time my best friend passed away and then my grandma also passed away. But then my community college was telling me that, oh, you ran out of money for college. And then on top of that, there was a girl that I was dating, quote unquote, when you're in high school, for however far high school dating gets you, and she was alluding to sleeping with another person. So for me, I was like, okay, there's nothing left for me at home. Let me just go try to make something of myself. We were poor. We were living in like a singular room with four or five people. The military is a great stepping stone to get you out of a place that you don't really want to be in. But it is also a shame that the military only targets like lower income neighborhoods, etc. But for me, I used it to my advantage. It gave me the position that I am today at 26. So,
Well, I'm glad that you were able to progress forward and get to where you are today. But I know that, while of course you mentioned that, of course you wanted to uplift yourself, is that I know that you wanted to also uplift your personal community, specifically your family.
yeah.
Yeah, and so for you, like what would you say like was the true drive to wanting to to help uplift your family, because I know that as you just mentioned that you grew up in poverty and that it was it was your whole family living within a single room. And but would you say that there was anything specific that really was like a driving factor in being able to say this is the reason why I wanted to go further?
Anything, everything. Like when your family is in that position and you have the ability to help. When anybody's in that situation, and you have the ability to help out. You have you then have the propensity and the motivation to move forward. So that burning passion of, oh, like I never want to see my parents living in a basement again. Oh, like I never want my mom or dad to tell me we can't get eggs because they're too expensive. Things like that.
But but for you growing up, was it always that way for you as long as you can remember?
Yeah. I grew up in a nuclear household, which means that in most Asian communities it's very common to have your grandmother, your grandfather, your mother, father, and then however umpteen amount of kids that they have, right? So yeah, it's always been like that. The like I would compare with like some of my like with like my poor friends, quote unquote, right? Oh, like what's your broke meal? People would talk about like, oh, like it was powdered milk and sugar. And mine would be like butter and bread. So sometimes we couldn't even afford the powdered milk.
So for you, I know, of course, that you said that like it always been like that for you growing up, and that you would often, yeah, I mean, compared to some of your other friends who may be in similar situations when it comes to poverty. But for you, do you remember like any like joys from your time there in your childhood, or trying to make the most of the opportunities that you did have?
Yeah, yeah, I think most people actually have this. I think that's actually an American problem where it's like the paradox of choice. You have too much to enjoy. Whereas when you're contented with what you have is enough. Like I'm a huge fan of reading Greek philosophy, and I'm not sure which philosopher it was from. It might have been Aristotle or Socrates, but they talk about how true happiness isn't the desire for more; it's the contentment with less. So sometimes less is more.
So so both for you growing up, what would you say, you know, was something that that you wanted to do? Because of course, as you just mentioned, I know that you ultimately enlisted into the military to help uplift yourself. But was that ultimately the end goal, or where were you trying to to initially go, or at least hope that you're able to go to?
Hmm. So, actually, at the time when I was a kid, I had always dreamed of being like a homicide detective for some reason. There was a period in life to where I was like very passionate about like crime and specifically like crime against women, so like human trafficking, etc., or like women trafficking. Like I know that men get trafficked too. That's why I'm not trying to like have like this blanket statement, but like human trafficking, especially against like women and kids. And there was a homicide detective actually that I did meet, and he was saying that it was the greatest honor that he's ever had was delivering these women and delivering these kids from these predators. And just because of his character and me wanting to, you know, do ride-alongs with him, he was the one trying to convince me to do the police explorers, etc. At the time. It that was like the natural choice of wanting to serve. So for me, it was always I thought I was too dumb to ever be a doctor, um, and so I thought it would be easier to just pick up a gun and defend somebody. Obviously, it goes deeper than that. It's not that easy. And funny enough, when I joined the military, I ended up moving towards medicine. Now that I've been out, it's I like completely moved trajectories again. But yeah, that was I wanted to be a homicide detective when I was younger.
Well, I'm glad at least that that those stories were able to help. I mean, motivate you to want to go to that path, even though that's not necessarily the path that you went on. But but entering into the military, I know you said that you ultimately went a little bit down the the medical path, and so was that like a path that that you had wanted to go down the time, or was that sort of like just one of the options that ultimately just piqued your interest just a little bit more?
I it continues with that heart of service. So there was a lot of military benefits. So I was reading Rich Dad Poor Dad, I think, in like middle school or like my freshman year of high school, and the military was able to give you free school, housing. They give you 3 square meals a day. So to me, like the deal was impeccable. I originally wanted to just join the military, take any job, and the fastest job that could have gotten me out was being a corpsman or a medic. And that heart of service still continued. Like I like that machismo almost, that masculinity of, oh, like let me do the hardest thing possible. So when I got into combat medic school, I applied for like the special ops pipeline, so like reconnaissance. It's essentially being like a special forces corpsman or a special forces medic. I failed the school. I can't really swim very well, um, but being in the military was really a means to an end for education and to start real estate actually. So it's like two faceted to where everything was a means to get my family out of the situation that they were in.
And would you say that, yeah, at least thus far, yeah, in your story, like with you being in the military, we like how were you able to help out with that up to that point, and provide assistance to your family?
For a while, actually, before I bought properties, before I bought my first house for my mom and dad, I was sending money home, like 250, 300. Like, yeah, I could have gotten like a nicer car, but I don't really have expensive car taste. I drive a 2008 Honda Civic. Um, I like ate a lot of lentils and rice, a lot of spaghetti. But yeah, I would send home whatever little minuscule paycheck I had to my parents. Um, but after I bought them a house, I told them that I would retire them, and they came to live with me.
I love that I mean, that you were able to do that, yeah, do that for them. And so, how far into it, were you when you were finally able to buy them that house? How was that, and how was that feeling, for you and your family?
It's good. To answer the second question first, I was working 80, sometimes 90-hour weeks to pay for the first property. So the military gives you the VA loan, but I still had to work a lot of hours because I call them crappy grabbies. So pre foreclosures, stuff that you would get on auctions and stuff. So I bought a pre foreclosure, and the roof needed work, the crawl space needed work. I wanted to renovate the house completely, renovate the bathrooms, the kitchen, whatever, right? Make it a dream home for my parents. And honestly, like it really isn't. Like, yeah, it's got the granite countertops, and it's much nicer than when we found it. So working those 80 to 90-hour weeks was super imperative because I had to make enough money to be able to pay for those repairs. So, but at the end of the day, long story short, my family has a house that they can make higher player risks if they wanted to. Like, specifically, my parents can make money moves, or they could rot away on a beach in Costa Rica if they wanted to. Like, it's really up to them. Like, there's still a bit like a mortgage that they have to help support, but you're never going to be able to find a $700 mortgage anywhere in this economy. And so the timing was good when I bought it during pre-COVID, and the rest is history. I've had the house for almost 6 years now. Six years. No, closer to five, I think. Closer to 5 years.
Well, first of all, I did want to say I'm just so glad that that you were able to do that, and and provide that much needed support to your family and really keeping family first.
I appreciate that. Yeah, it can be a daunting task. And I recognize that not everybody would do that. But in most Asian communities and most Asian families, the I felt like I had to fulfill an honor obligation first.
And I did actually want to speak a little bit about, the process of getting this, because while I know, of course, that you were, determined to help out your family and to, work the hours to make that happen. But how was the time, for you working those 80 to 90 hours? How was that for you personally and in your well-being? Like, yeah, like how was that whole process for you? And were you able to, and to be able to confide in others, like friends or peers or potential mentors, like about your experience and what you were trying to do, or did you have to keep it all to yourself?
Regarding mental health, no, like I had a decent support system. Now, granted, not not every single person would understand if they weren't Asian or if they weren't of an ethnicity or race that catered towards the I guess Eastern mentality. Like here in America, it's like, oh, if you're 18, I'm gonna move out right away, or the parents will kick you out. Um, so I had like a good support system of real estate investors who were like, if you didn't get them, like you probably could have had more properties, and I understand that. I've had friends who would say the same, where they're like, oh, like your family's using you. But at the end of the day, the relationship you have with the people that you have is never going to be put under such scrutiny because like they're your loved ones versus outside looking in and people who know you even on a, let's say, subcutaneous level. It it's difficult to hear things that sound like they're against you, but they're also just looking out for your well-being. um, but at the end of the day too, it's the relationship you have with your family is between you and them. So for example too, I'll just go back to those honor obligations again. I was bitter for the longest time. I was like, why me? Like, is it because I'm like this middle child? Is it because I have middle child syndrome? Like, am I doing this for affirmation? Am I doing this for validation? But once I was able to fulfill those honor obligations, I could then ask myself, how do I make myself proud? And it's kind of been an interesting ride.
And so I do want to, of course, continue forward a little bit. And so, at what point ultimately did you, did you end up leaving the military? Because I know, of course, that you mentioned that it was a means to end to you to make sure that you could at least have, even though, at least from what you're describing, it wasn't necessarily the environment that you wanted to be in, but it at least provided, what was it? I guess, a stable environment for you to at least be able to be in and to work and make money for your family. But at what point, you know were you was it that you were able to progress forward?
I feel like I was always moving forward, even if it wasn't a place that, well, because like we're like diamonds because we're forged from these pressures. So doing the thing that you don't want to do is what gives you the most growth. So I will say that I'm exactly where I need to be. So I'm Christian. I was gonna say like a hardcore Christian, but I'm not sure like if that would be like what's the word, like an oxymoron, because being Christian means that you're flawed and that you have difficulties. There's a Hebrew word that I love in this current season of my life. It's called Rapha, and Rapha means to surrender your life to the path and surrender your weapons, surrender your shield, your guns, your sword, surrendering everything to the path that you're destined to walk on. And that path is given to you by God. However hard, however easy, however tepid, however steeped in solitude it is, it becomes your path. And so, do you fight against a path that was chosen for you? At least in my personal beliefs, right? Um, do you fight against a God given path? Oh, that's my cat. Um, do you fight against everything that you believe in? And it's a bit. I find that it's a bit of a complicated spot because this is my path, so I'll walk it. But when you look to your left and to your right, and when you continue moving on that path, you'll see who's with you on that path. You'll collect the things, the friends, the memories, the accolades, the experiences along that path as well.
And I just think that's just such a great and fitting analogy in how you mentioned that. And so, like, in continuing to, for you personally moving forward, as you mentioned, as you always continue to do so. So at what point, when did you gain an interest in, in media that ultimately started your media company?
Yeah, so I was a fighter out of Shift Combat Sports. It's a Muay Thai gym, Muay Thai boxing, like conditioning, just overall fitness and stuff. And I noticed that there was a lot of fighters who went undocumented. So there's a lot of fighters who didn't get, like a lot of no name, quote unquote, fighters. A lot of people who spent hours in the gym and their stories not being told because they weren't champion. So for me, I wanted to document combat sports photography. And I did for 4 or 5 years. And Coach Adam from Shift Combat Sports blessed me with that honor. That was essentially the start of the media company because I realized that it wasn't just photography. I could do video, I could do. But what I actually found was before taking photos of those fighters, getting to hear like what got them there, and that's kind of what got me into podcasting. I actually have this very weird habit of oh, notifications. I have this very weird habit of like talking to random strangers and then like asking them for life advice. So I was already doing that before I had a podcast. Um, I think life is too short to not be curious. And like I think I've said this on my podcast too before, but like on my gravestone, I would want it to say Beau Deseo, ever curious.
So I did want to ask too. So so for your everlasting curiosity, that did you ever think that it would bring you to to where you are now and to keep progressing you forward?
It's like learning multitude of different experiences, and I think you can only have that with curiosity. Um, you teach a fish how to climb a tree, it's going to grow up thinking it's stupid. So instead of only hyper focusing on the things that you might be bad at, you people tend to cling to things that they're good at. But let's say that you didn't learn things based off of aptitude to complete a job. You could just be curious on how good Italian food tastes or how good Asian food tastes. You could be curious on, can I ride a mountain bike even though like I've been a martial artist for years? Um, so that everlasting curiosity has been, what can I do? What can I experience? How can I live well before I die?
And that is just, I think that's just such, a powerful message there. And and again, like I say too, that yeah, something that I appreciate about you is that not only are you working to let's say uplift your family, both um both morally and financially, but also to trying to help move yourself forward as well, and and to continue being curious and hearing people's stories and out of curiosity. So what initially brought you to like you mentioned, like asking those strangers questions about life advice? Was that always a part of you, or was it just where at some point it's just like let's just see what they what they have to say?
When my best friend died, I bowed to his casket, and the wailing that his father let out was, it still haunts me to this day. There was a lot of words that I never asked. His name was Hanson, Hanson King. There's a lot of words that I never asked Hanson, and there was a lot of words that I couldn't say to his grieving family. A lot of like just anything, right? Like not just I'm sorry for your loss, and then like everybody's crying. Um, Life is too short to not ask or be curious. That's my answer. Is there's not really I guess you could say that that moment was the catalyst, but you could learn anything from anyone.
You really can. And I did want to take a moment, and I did want to ask too. So yeah, so I know even though that was that I believe you mentioned back in in high school, but I nevertheless did want to definitely give my condolences to you, and but I'm glad that you were able to, to take that, to take what you had fought then, and in the grieving and the energy that you had then into what you're doing now, and telling people stories, and and working to make sure that stories don't go untold.
I appreciate that. Yeah, life is too short. Actually, it's funny. That's actually how bards were. Like in history, if you wanted to destroy an entire lineage, you would kill the bards. You would kill the storytellers.
And so I actually want to ask too. So, what does it mean, to you to be, to be a storyteller? To have, to have this power, and and to be able to ask these, important questions.
Much like a book wouldn't be a book without the binding of the spine or the ink that blots the page. Um, Deseo Media Company and the Oxano podcast, they really just serves as a platform for people to talk about who they were and how they got to where they are. So whether that looks like a pen to a paper or a microphone to a camera, being a storyteller has its pleasures. Telling stories is how we've grown across millennia and across generations. So I'd like to believe that I'm just one small piece of the cog that creates stories.
And and going further into that though is yeah is when you're going to tell people's stories, and of course now with your podcast as well. And actually, I'll backtrack. So at what point did you decide to take your wanting your desire to hear people's stories, and and change it into a podcast format?
Well, people can just talk to you. Like whenever you have somebody speaking across from you, whether it be here or in person, there's power in somebody communicating with you. Um, I don't know, maybe that's like my words of affirmation, love language talking, but there's power in being able to connect with somebody. I find deep honor in the exchange of words intimately. Yeah.
Yeah, it just such it yeah it just really is just such a a powerful part of of communication. And to me, it's helps. It's what helps make us human. Is connecting with people and wanting to connect with others, and hopefully to uplift others. And it's something that at least for me, and I know for you, it's just such a powerful ability that we have that I don't ever want to take for granted.
Hmm. Choice words. Choice words, very strong. I agree.
And and ultimately for you, of course, while I know that you know that you have been working, of course, on your real estate, like I said, help your family, and and also continue with that passion. So at what point did you decide it was time for for your for your media company? Because I know you mentioned the foundation that that you built on, and wanting to, like I said, and to tell those stories, and that it doesn't just have to be just photography or just video, that you're able to do storytelling with it. But at what point did you realize that this is something I can actually do and do well?
I was already getting paid to take photos, but I was recollecting moments of working the 80 to 90-hour weeks, breaking my back for what? Acquisition of real estate, more money. And really diving into the why, I found the deepest pleasure in podcasting. So, whether or not, and like the podcasting is merely like that personal free element package, I guess, of the media company, because we still do commercials, we still do photo shoots. We get approached all the time if we do web development, etc., which we do. We do the full nine that a media company can do. Maybe just with the exception of like voice acting or providing talent. But podcasting, statistically speaking, I think 73 or 74% of just Americans alone consume most of their content or educational. Like that's how they grasp education at a at a better at a better understanding or comprehension is because they watch podcasts. So it serves as both educational and hopeful for people who might listen because it inspires other people to speak. And I've gotten people who don't really like talking on the podcast to talk. People who are very insightful but don't really have the desire to speak just because I find them excelling. Um, Anything from athletes to cancer survivors to business owners to CEOs. It's been the deepest honor in being able to speak with them.
Yeah, and actually, I did want to ask you about about two of the different episodes that you had put out, and so I know that one of the episodes I wanted to ask you about is when you had the ability to speak with someone that you had looked up to, one of the co-founders of MapQuest.
Mm-hmm.
And so, how was that? Yeah, how was that for you being able to speak with someone that you had, personally looked up to, and what did it mean to you to be able to have that conversation with him?
He's just a person. When I first met him, I shook his hand and I was like, geez, this is the guy who sold a company for 51 billion or like the odd, you know, however X amount of dollars that. And I realized that he smiled, he ate, he said he had to go to the bathroom. When we realized that a lot of these people are also just figuring it out, and after that podcast, he recognized that he had a lot of flaws too. Um, and it was inspiring because he was asking me for help. He was asking me to cut clips up if ever he wanted to do podcast productions. The ecosystem in which we live in, we identify the players. And when you identify who is in the ecosystem when we move in proximity to goals and when we lead with intention, you won't go wrong. So if if you have a desire to be in like the startup space, this is coming from him. You have to identify where to get the wood, where to get the axe, where to like all these materials to get to propel yourself forward. For me, like at the time, it was just an item that I would use. It was literally just a super new. It was essentially Google Maps at the time. So being able to meet the founder of Google Maps, quote unquote, was an honor. But then you also realize that he did it because he was nerdy about cartography and wanted to make maps for everybody. And that's what he did. And that's what he got wealthy off of. Now he's a venture capitalist and he's just helping others do the same.
But I like that, I mean, that with everyone that that you speak to is that you like identifying, the person behind it, not necessarily, the title or the position or, whatever the case may be. And so what does it mean to you to, I mean, to really speak to the person and to hear, their personal journey, their flaws, and, you know, and even like maybe like what they would want to, do differently, if anything.
I will say that too many people are valued for their title, too many people are undervalued for who they are. So the content of your character is not like your title is not indicative of the content of your character. And so often people get blindsided by hearing the name CEO or hearing the name president or hearing the name founder. These are all just titles. Who is the person behind the title?
Yeah, I really love. I mean, just that sentiment, and and the meaning behind it. And so I want to take this question and ask too. So I know you were also able to have a chance to have your your family on the podcast as well with one of your brothers alongside your mom. And so, what did it mean to you to be able to speak with them on the podcast and to be able to to ask them questions and to relive memories, but also look forward to the future?
I think because of the weight of my podcast, like the gravity of the questions I'm able to ask, it then gives me the confidence, at least like within my podcast office, to ask those same questions, perhaps deep, intrusive, probing questions to even my family. Our family is very close, but seldom do we have those types of conversations. And don't get me wrong, like they're both loving, but to be able to ask them that type of question with that type of gravity, with the brevity that I had, it was like being able to ask them questions unfettered. And as for speaking of the future, it is interesting because um, now that my parents have been living essentially with me and my little brother for the past 6 years now, um, we all need to kind of go our separate ways because we're all wanting different things in life. Relationship is still great. I told them, hey, move into my house in Williamsburg. But my little brother wants to travel the world for a year. He wants to go to Arizona. My older brother has a coffee shop that he's trying to run, and now he's the fractional owner for a home care facility. And myself, I was told I got a full ride to grad school, so potentially staying in this area of Virginia Beach. Um, it's it's been a good ride, and the podcast was kind of like the hoorah of like I'm gonna ask you whatever I want, and I don't care if it pisses you off.
But but thinking even to like the conversation that you had with your mom, and I was able to to tune into to a bit of of that, and I just thought it was just such a powerful conversation that both of you had, and
Thank you.
and very emotional at times as well.
Yeah, it was it was meant for. There are a lot of people who do live vicariously, like on the internet or feel better, etc. Get advice. That was kind of a nod to the men and women who might not have a mom, who might not have a healthy mother figure in their life, and unfortunately, that podcast was actually targeted towards the friends who do watch the podcast and who don't have a good relationship with their mom or who don't have a mom at all. So the fact that I was able to get resounding applause from the friends that I needed it, and for them to tell me that, yeah, like I cried watching your podcast, I've won. Like that's the point of the podcast, is it's to just have authentic conversations and help inspire other people, or to help give some type of peace if they can't get it. Maybe that's too bold headed of me to say that, especially like on a recorded podcast. But if my words or the words of my guests could help inspire, why would I not try? I think that's all we ever really could do. It's the deepest honor, is to help inspire.
And I certainly believe that you do it well, and and something I did at least want to ask you about that episode, if I may, is that one of the things you had mentioned is that even though in your childhood that there were so many uphill battles that you had to work for. I mean, in terms of finances and life experiences, that is that you're building on the foundation that your parents were able to give you after them going through their own battles and trying to do the same, um and that hoping that you're able to at least you know bring everyone to a better like yeah understanding and and continuing to move up. And so and so I did want to ask about that part of the, I mean, of the of the conversation. And so, yeah, and so for you, how was the, did your personal understanding, like, of your mom in that case, grow in, and evolve, especially over the years of doing your own, your own content in your own personal life and progressing?
Honestly, bro, I mean, at the end of the day, the that realization was already there when I was young. I had to get a job, like an under the table job in a noodle house, to help pay for bills. I realized that they really weren't. They didn't really know what they were doing. They were just trying to figure it out. I'm doing the same. You're doing the same. I'm sure at this point Elon Musk is still doing the same, even though his accolades and his accomplishments can pay for XYZ, right? But we're all just figuring it out. Nobody really knows what they're doing. I think everybody that might appear successful, all they are doing is chasing excellence, putting up daily shelves that they can turn back to. Because everybody has imposter syndrome, including me. I think I have it the worst out of anybody else. But what more for my mom? What more for my family?
Yeah, I definitely, fully agree with you. And yeah, I feel like, I mean, going to, a personal example of myself, I used to think like, wow, it's like everyone knows like, like what they're doing. figured that there was some like, book of rules and how to, live life that you just get when you're just a little bit older. But, it turns out that's not the way things work. You have to continue learning and progressing, and and sometimes your pace might be different than someone else's pace, but sometimes just the journey that comes along, along with it, for better or for worse.
Yeah. I cling to my father's advice in times of better or worse is just being willing to adapt to any situation and be yourself. Just continue being yourself. Show up for yourself. Because when you betray your nature and when you betray your true form, you you'll betray everything else.
And throughout your personal journey, have you been able to, I mean, to fully stay true to yourself the whole time?
No, no, there compromises were made willingly in thinking that there were in thinking that I could get there faster. But timing is important. Precision is also important. Dedication and patience are also just as important. But I think what is most important is to recognize that things can and will change.
And ultimately, I mean, have you seen a change or shift in yourself? Yeah, I mean, over the years, even in terms of your personal interests, comfort and well being, and what you want to continue seeing to shift and progress forward.
Oh God, yes. I think any man, you go from nihilistic, this bravado, machismo, you cling to X, Y, Z with tenacity in your heart. But like I was saying, it's the contentment with less, or recognizing what is your nature. I think oftentimes many people are told what their nature is, as opposed to just accepting who and what they are. I think the biggest lie that we're actually told is you can be anything you want. I think the biggest truth that should be told is you strive to evolve to become everything that you are. Because obviously I'm 5'6", right? I'm not going to be an NBA player. That'd be a bit the you telling me that I'd be able to go into the NBA would be the biggest lie you could ever tell me. But if you knew that I was a writer or that I loved to cook, like there were things that I learned along the way or things that I had a natural propensity for. You could the encouragement to say if you double down or triple down on what you're good at and cast it aside what you're bad at or what you don't even really care about, you'd get so much further, which is the truth. I think that's where most successful people get it right. Like I'm almost positive that like Jeff Bezos, like all these famous guys, right? they probably suck at something. Like it's got to be something. Nobody's perfect. You can't have it all.
Yeah, I mean that's just absolutely, yeah, absolutely true. And I feel like where where you can see the most success, lies, I think some of the biggest insecurities sometimes, and the biggest, I mean, personal, not necessarily failures, but I feel like sometimes you need those to, I mean, to drive you forward. And it may not be in the way that we want or at the time that we want, but it helps build us to who we are and what other people see in us.
Yeah, timing and execution.
And so I did want to, I mean, to shift gears a bit and ask more about, about your media company. And so overall, like, how long have you all officially, been in business as of the time of recording?
Um, 1 year and 1 month, so not long.
Well, happy late, 1 year anniversary.
Thanks.
Yeah, of course. And so how's this year been for you? Like, how has the trajectory and the journey been, you know, for you personally and as a company?
Very slow. Okay, for the company, slow. They say that all startups usually fail within the first 5 years, and only 10% survive. But that's the same could be true for any small business. It usually takes 5 years before you're able to recuperate from any loss. I'm a huge fan of championing leverage. So like all my cameras, all my podcast equipment, etc., were either bartered for or they were bought on like credit cards. Um, but despite that, the clients keep coming in. Like I just closed on a. Oh, I probably can't say that. I just closed on a local CEO. He wants me to do his podcast productions. Um, Closed on another founder. They were saying that they want me to help outsource their production work. Um, I had my first celebrity, so there's actually a very good chance that I'm going to be like the creative director or the executive. Again, whatever title that you want to head the project, because I think she wants to rebrand herself and she wants to move into more like women's tips, but like adding comedy. So like being a producer for that would be dope. And just like I still am holding on to this umbrella that like the rain is gonna come. But a practice in rhetoric is realizing that the rain might not ever come, and if it does come, like maybe have it in your trunk of the car. Like that's fine, right? But you don't need to hold an umbrella when it's sunny and it's perfectly 70 degrees. Um, but the media company is doing if anything, the media company is doing much better than I was expecting. All these things I was expecting to happen at year 4. The fact that I was able to do this at like month 6 is ridiculous. So we're capable of so much more when you just put the reps in and put the time in. I'm very hard on myself because I do think that like if I just worked really, 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 really hard, I could be like a 6-figure agency within like year 2 or year 2.5. Um, but yeah, I'm finding balance with actually having a social life, trying to date, balancing the media company family, and then now school. So if I join the military for school and the option is finally there, yeah, like I'm in this field of entrepreneurship, so to speak. But education has always been my goal. And now I can consider becoming a doctor because I'll have a full ride to grad school. So there's a whirlwind of options. But again, that's the danger is that paradox of choice. So with the media company, um, going strong. We'll see if I can just completely outsource. I do have a creative director, and actually, you know him. It's Justin. So Justin Diemson has helped create and pave the way for the media company originally when we were trying to put our name out there for commercials. So if I didn't have him, the media company wouldn't be getting an income.
Well, Justin certainly is. I mean, yeah, a good friend of mine. And of course, yeah, I had him on my, my podcast at the end of 2023. Oh, and I guess on my audio podcast in 2021 as well. But I mean, it's been great being able to, I mean, to hear his personal progression, and then of course, yours now, and so I mean, it's so great though that you've been able to, that you all been able to grow, you know, your company forward, and like I said, be where you thought you'd be like in year four now, and so I guess just for those who are tuning in, like, are you able to just give like a little snippet as to like some of the projects that y'all have worked on?
Podcast productions, a lot of podcast productions on my part, but a lot of commercials, like running ads for like Joy UT in Virginia Beach or Angie's Bakery, like everybody's heartfelt favorite. Like these are all connections that I made because I kind of just one, I either just had the balls to walk up and be like, "Can we shoot you a video?" Two, just warm leads. So whenever you start creating projects for anything, like the proof is in the pudding when the product comes out. So you'll have an easier time getting clients when you have a book of business or a proof of concept. At that point, whoever wants to hire you will hire you. Whoever doesn't, they won't.
Yeah, I mean that certainly is. I mean, just so true, and yeah, I mean it's so great to be able to hear. I mean that what you've been able to do. I mean, what you've been able to do thus far in your journey. I know you still have a long way to go, and I'm just so excited to, I mean, to see what you're going to continue doing and continuing working to hear the stories of others and to, uplift others, and hopefully, them being able to uplift you as well as you continue your journey forward.
Hmm. Yeah. It. Well, yeah. All I can say is thank you. I appreciate the affirmation. I don't know. I guess you saying that kind of made me want to like run to the nearest stop sign. Yeah. I don't really take compliments very well. It's something that I'm working on in this season of life. It's like that validation almost.
And so I actually wanted, since I know, of course, that you are, a podcaster, well, I did want to allow a moment before we begin. Yeah, wrapping up our discussion is I want to ask, did you have any questions for me in this conversation? Because I know, thus far, of course, we have went, I mean, a lot into, your personal journey and progression, and also speaking about your company and podcast. But I did want to allow, an opportunity for you to ask me any questions while we're still speaking.
Yeah. My biggest thing is it's funny because like I still get nervous when I'm the host. Like I could be talked to all day, but like when I'm the host, I'm like, why do I have anxiety? How has podcasting been for you for as long as you've been doing it? Like, are you kind of just like, okay, this is another podcast, like this is another day, or are you like, why does this still suck? Like, why do I still get nervous?
It's so interesting with that because it takes a lot to, I mean, to really get me, nervous per se. But at the same time, I'm not sure if you can tell, but I'm a very introvert and reserved person. I like keeping to myself, but in the same regard too, is that I like asking people questions. I like asking the why question. Like,
Yeah.
why did you decide to do this? Like, not to judge you. I'm just curious. Um, and so for me, I feel like podcasting has been such a extension of my inner desire to just ask questions and get to know people. Like I don't know, I've grown up watching television, and I have just become so intrigued with just uh, the the nice fiction friendships between different characters. And so I suppose a part of that is just like, it's like I want to meet as many friends as possible, and and get to know them. And so for me, like, I see podcasting and speaking with people as getting to know a new friend, or sometimes if I already know them, sometimes they're people I know very well. Sometimes they're family members, and it's like, but what else is there for us to speak about? And it's so interesting being able to know people further, even for people that you thought you knew everything about them. But in terms of like I also feel too that it's still a learning process. Like I'm still learning every day. I can look back at a podcast I just recorded a couple weeks ago and be like, oh my gosh, I paused there, and or like it's like, wow, this is slow. I could probably do better than a little better than this now. But you know, I love what I do, and I'm passionate being and being able to hear the stories of others. But sometimes, yeah, but sometimes too, it's the question of, am I asking the right question? Or it's like I know where I want to get in the conversation, but it's like, how do you get there sometimes? And I think it's all a learning experience. There's some episodes where um, I end out and I'm like, that's the best discussion ever. I mean, ever. And there's other ones where it's just like, I could have done better. And in listening back, I know it's all right. And, a lot of times, like, the guest loves it and they tell me how thankful they are that I asked. But it's like, even like one minor slip up for me. And I spend the whole episode thinking, oh my gosh, I messed this up. I can't believe I messed this up. When in reality, it's just, sometimes being too hard on yourself. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, I get that. I think as a podcast host, I can resonate with you the most.
Yeah. And I would say though, the thing that actually does get me nervous, like I said, very few things truly get me very nervous and sometimes even anxious, is doing something by myself. And I know you had done, I believe, one or two different episodes where you just did by yourself and did like a little reflection. And how was that for you?
It's always kind of buns. Actually, no, I've only ever done one episode. The second time I did it was like answering a Q&A, which got like a bunch of random raging questions. I probably should have filtered it out before I started answering. Some of them were like really like way left field. Um, Reflections are good. Actually, if anything, if to kind of like put more content out there and I guess to grow, because the what I'm actually going to grad school for would be psychology. So if I can go to grad school, then it's like, oh, maybe I'll just become a therapist. And then the podcast can increase to, oh, like a therapist is just podcasting with somebody else. That way I can make like that the theme. Because already the underlying theme of my podcast is just checking in on people. It's mostly mental health. I would love for BetterHelp to be able to sponsor the podcast one day because that's really all it is. It's just like, who are you? What have you done? How are you going to get to where you're at? Do you want to talk about it? And that. If that's not mental health, I don't know what is. So that's been the that's really been like the biggest thing for me with the podcast.
But no, but I actually, want to take a little bit of what you had just said too. So like I said, just checking in and do you want to talk about it? And so has the response to that sort of question ever been like, no, not really?
Yeah, 100%. There's a the amount of rejections I'll get from multiple different people saying they don't want to do a podcast is innumerable. And now, granted, right, like there's most people of excellence that want to talk about it because they know that they need to talk about it, or if they want to cultivate thought leadership, and that's really what most podcasting is cultivating thought leadership. Now, don't get me wrong. Do I feel like I'm a bit behind on the train? A little bit because podcasting blew up like during the pandemic. Now here I am podcasting when everybody's back to regular life. But what I will say is you have to get used to rejections when asking for people to be on the podcast because the person that you might really, really, really want to be on the podcast will be the first person to say no. But once they see your proof of concept and how much work you've done, they might come around and say yes. So it was like that with a local rising star here in the 757. It was like that with Celebrity. Like I had to show proof of concept first. It was also like that with my host company when I was still interning. He gave me the green light to. He wanted to be on my podcast, and honestly, like I have Riverside too, but I prefer the in person element, and I just like if I've flown to California just to podcast with my real estate mentor and other people in the area. So
Yeah, and I did want to, I mean, in that nature, ask too. So how is it? Is there? Well, I guess. So, what is the difference for you in? I mean, in the different ways between, for instance, speaking with someone virtually versus have people come into your studio, then, and then even those as opposed to going to where the guest is.
proximity. It's convenient to talk like this, um, but you'll never really know a person's body language or mannerisms until they're in front of you. That's me. I like the in person element.
And yeah, and continuing with that though is even like since you mentioned that you've even as I said flown out to speak with someone in person, is do you see a difference in people when they're, for instance, like I said, in your studio versus you going to where where they are?
No, not really, because I have a remote traveling setup, and as long as it's in person, I don't really. Yeah.
Okay. And the reason I ask that too, because on one hand, they're coming to your domain where it's, your studio and you're able to provide the environment. Whereas, in the other case, it's like you're going to their domain where they're comfortable and and where they are the ones familiar with it, which is why I asked.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Yeah, I mean, all you really need is two cameras or three microphones and a recorder. Anything else is extra.
Yeah, like I said, well, that makes perfect sense. And like I said, I've just, like I said, really, like I said, enjoyed this discussion, and and beginning to close out as well. I did want to ask, so of course, I know you. So of course, I know as a podcaster and communicator that I mean, you of course, work and speaking with others and hearing their stories. But how is it for you to be able to tell a little bit about your story, whether it's I mean, here today or even on your platforms?
I don't really like talking about myself as much, but I am an open book, and I'll go as deep or as transparent. Um, but as far as telling my story on like other podcasts, I've done I think I've done 5 or 6 podcasts already, and it's always been an interesting experience what comes out because it's not digging for anything. It's just people asking me about my thoughts or asking me about the story that I've had. They're asking for my input, not my expertise. Um, is the way that I view it as. Because maybe my expertise is in talking to other people. It's kind of I feel like my expertise is in asking the questions that pull out the substance that exists in a human being versus just answering questions. Um, but not that I've always desired to be a gray man, but it's always nice to probe the deeper questions without fault. So maybe that answer was pretty deflective. At the end of the day, being able to talk about myself is still an interesting experience.
And I mean, and going a little bit further into into that too. So I suppose for you, so of course, like I said, this is that you've been on, like I said, around 5 podcasts, and of course have hosted many yourself, and I'm sure, like I said, many people ask you, just in general, like what's your story, but what would you say is something about you that people don't ask you that but you would want people to know?
You should ask me what my favorite color is.
What is your favorite color?
Emerald green.
Ooh, is there a reason for that?
Um, I just like the color green. It's pretty. Um, Green Lantern says it's apparently the color of will. I don't I don't know if I believe that. I just like emerald green.
That is really fascinating. And out of curiosity, if yeah, I said since that's your favorite color, is have you ever incorporated that into any of your I said any of the design language for your company or anything else that you've done?
No, actually, just in what I wear for clothes.
Interesting. Would you say that is there any specific reason as to why you didn't then?
Minimalism. Like right now, what looks sexy is black, white, gray, anything more monotone with a lot of empty space. Yeah, so that's yeah. I mean, black and white. My hair is black. Contrast with white glasses. Shirt is black. Like there's like a color palette. Anything neutral, I think, is good to dress in. But as far as emerald green being like the choice color for clothing and not my company, yeah, like just anything that is bold and less is more. So the minimalistic designs. I think our generation is definitely leaning more towards like the minimalist design type of deal. Not like the 70s, like green, yellow, orange color scheme.
Well, I feel like sometimes everything just comes back around. So it'd be interesting to see what the rest of the 2020s do, and even going into 2030s.
We will, we will unfortunately see. We're getting old.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you're definitely right about that, and so only time will tell. In fact, even by the time that this releases, who knows? I mean, some trends right now just really just come and go very quickly, but make a lasting impact.
Yeah.
But yeah, and so but I did want to ask. So for anyone that is tuning in and wants to support your company and what you're doing, where are the best places for them to potentially find you and continue following your story?
Yeah. Honestly, Instagram at deseomedia.com. You just also look up the Oxana podcast on YouTube. Um, Unless you're a client listening in, you're probably not going to seek out client services. So my website is currently down now for some reason, but that's also at deseomediacompany.com. But Instagram is totally fine at Deseo Media Company.
Well, awesome. Well, last but certainly not least, like I said, I just think that, of course, like I said, that you brought just so much, wisdom to this episode, and it's just been so fun to have a conversation and to hear your insight into everything. But I did want to allow for you to go ahead and end out our episode with whatever be, a final thought, a favorite quote, whatever the case may be. The floor is all yours.
Hmm. Something that I've been championing alongside one of my closest friends. His name is Brendan Rivera. Subconscious action done in repetition. I'm sorry. Let me backtrack. Action done in repetition become the subconscious mind. Thought done in repetition also become the subconscious mind. So take that as you will.
Powerful words to close by. Thank you so much, Hazed, for coming on and for speaking with us. And please keep me in touch with everything that you're going to do. And I'm just so excited to continue supporting you.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, well, for those tuning in, thank you so much, as always, for tuning into the Tansson Talk Show. I always appreciate it every week. Continue tuning in as we continue on our mission to bring people together. I'll see you next time. Take care.
Thanks, guys.